I'm going to read a reply that's better than any reply I've seen so far, and honestly I wish I'd come up with it. And I'm also going to read my limited commentary on articles that were submitted as proof that Chernobyl was somehow not as bad as Fukushima. So here we go with them. 2011, right after it happened, Scientific American article about a Norwegian Institute for Air Research in such and such, atmospheric scientist, non-physicist, named Andreas Stohl, and his math-based reconstruction that was then reviewed by an uninvolved, retired nuclear physicist, Lars-Erik De Geer, who is now working at the Swedish Defense Research Agency atmospheric modeler. Again, this is modeling data. Right after the incident, he said the basis for this model looks convincing. He also then cautioned everybody, which everyone ignores, ongoing ground surveys are the only way to truly establish the public health risk. And then it mentions Tomoya Yamauchi, a radiation physicist, but all it does is he mentions that he thinks the work is productive or useful. It does not say in any way, shape, or form that any of this shows that Fukushima is worse than Chernobyl, and it was really preliminary stuff, and it has nothing to do with them making a claim of Fukushima being much, much worse than anything at all. This is all before we even had all the data in. And they also acknowledge that you don't rely on modeling, you just test things by measuring it. A link to the Inquisitr said that Kim McLendon, who's not a physicist, just a rando like me and you posting an article, said that the Democracy Now! Video interview with Michio Kaku shows that he said something concerning Chernobyl and Fukushima. Okay. Again, this is one of the only maybe 2 or 3 things that actually even mention Chernobyl. Fukushima power plant danger is potentially on the same level as Chernobyl, and is clearly a level 9 nuclear accident. It's not been declared that, right? Or has it? He's saying it's not worse than Chernobyl. He's saying it would be on par, and he was wrong about that. And he says further, it has further potential to be much worse, mathematically speaking only. Also, the Inquisitr citation said that they disavow any connection with Kim McLendon's opinion or Michio Kaku, and also the video it was supposed to prove that he said any of these things isn't there. So how do you know he said it? And someone read this off of an anti-nuke blog, copying it and referring to it. I don't use that. I use the actual article. The article didn't say that he said that it was worse than Chernobyl. He said that it could be, mathematically speaking. And that story on the Inquisitr, you can look up the timing for it if you want to, but it's an assertion by somebody about a previous interview. And then when I look it up, am I going to find out the Democracy Now! Video was... Everybody's recycling this shit. Anyway, next. I'll put in the time and date stamp for that. I'm tired of... once I spend more than a half hour looking up a link trying to find its real source, I assume it's obfuscated. That's the least obfuscated I could find for it. But okay, I'll look up the Democracy Now! Interview with Michio Kaku where he said this. But it's not in the article, so I got to go dig up the archives of it. Next one. Physics Today, page 20. Physics Today, issue 66 in 2013. A Parisian non-physicist and self-described anti-nuclear activist and anti-nuclear scientist, Michio Kaku, speaking as an international energy consultant, trying not to be identified even though he self-identifies as an anti-nuke person, an activist, said that remediation at Fukushima is much more complicated than the entombment carried out at Chernobyl. He didn't say it was worse. He said it's more complicated. Yeah, it is. But that doesn't mean it's putting out more material. It just means it's more of a pain in the ass dealing with it. None of these articles state categorically, after the fact, after measurement, based on empirical data, that Fukushima is worse than Chernobyl. Your argument's invalid because your own links don't bear this out. And one of them, I'm having trouble even finding the original source quote. And I'm about dollars to donuts sure it's the same one that he made a couple of weeks after Fukushima happened. So I'm a little annoyed by this. Anyway, Marie Curie died at 66 from aplastic anemia. It's most common among the elderly, so it'd be expected. Or in people in their teens and 20s. But the cause is unknown for 50% of the cases. That's why they're having trouble figuring out a way to prevent it. But in the cases where they can find a cause, here they are in order of importance. Heredity. Immune diseases, because it's an immune disease in and of itself. Exposure to chemicals. Exposures to drugs that cause immune suppression. And then finally, dead last, suspected radiation. It does not state that radiation is the cause for it. It's the least likely cause in the bunch. Why would you cite that for Marie Curie? Anyway, the main treatment they use for it is bone marrow transplant, and she died before that was really something we did on a regular enough basis. Assertion or statement made by somebody that seems rather sane. The ocean's three-dimensional. The surface of the land, essentially two-dimensional in surface. Chernobyl spread a layer of radioactive dust over Europe, primarily flat surfaces. I wouldn't lick a dusty sidewalk, but the same dust in a swimming pool of fresh water, you'd probably be okay drinking it, because it's not on the surface. It has more space to fill up. The same particles that are 10 inches apart on a surface are hundreds of feet apart, depending on the depth of water. Chernobyl was a graphite fire, pure carbon, pure soot, spread across Europe, loaded with alpha and beta emitters. The Pacific is already loaded with radioactive sources. Every river that runs into the sea, after cutting through radium and uranium, bearing rock for millions of years, all goes in it. Radiation is detectable with a meter. If you can buy one off eBay for $50, one, and stop worrying. I agree with WAPTEC. Our current power stations need fixing, improving, and making safe. It's more than possible these accidents don't need to happen, but the world doesn't end when they do, and we need interim technology until reusables are up to snuff, else climate change will sink us all. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And I'm repeating, none of the links bore out what the person said. In fact, most of them didn't even touch the subject. Somebody threw a bunch of links into a comment section trying to prove something. I no longer believe that person was being an honest commenter. I believe that they were cutting and pasting just to be able to sustain a stupid argument. And I did find their original comment before, and the person was being a little bit less than pleasant towards me on my own channel. Links below in the description below me.